The most powerful invention in the history of capitalism wasn't a steam engine. It wasn't the stock market. It wasn't even the computer. It was something far simpler, something almost invisible, a notebook, because for most of human history, merchants didn't actually know how much money they had. Wealth wasn't measured. It was remembered. Scattered notes, half-written records, instinct. That was the system. And for a while it worked. But then trade exploded. Goods began moving across continents. Ships carried fortunes across dangerous seas. Money started flowing faster than any human mind could track. And suddenly, memory wasn't enough anymore. In the counting houses of medieval Italy, something extraordinary happened. Merchants discovered a simple but revolutionary truth. Every transaction has two sides. Every movement of money has a mirror, debit, credit, balance. This idea will become known as double-entry bookkeeping. And the moment merchants began to see the world through a ledger, everything changed. Wealth stopped being guesswork. Control replaced chaos. And quietly, almost invisibly, modern finance was born. Welcome to the Financial Historian, where money, power, and history collide. And nothing is ever as simple as it looks. To understand why accounting changed the world, we need to step back, not to the age of kings and knights, but to the age of merchants. By the 13th century, trade across the Mediterranean was booming. The Crusades had reopened ancient trade routes, reconnecting Europe with the East. And suddenly, markets were flooded with new goods. Spices from India, silk from Byzantium, precious metals from Central Europe, wool from England. At the center of this growing web of commerce stood three powerful cities: Florence, Venice, Genoa. These weren't traditional kingdoms. They were merchant republics, places where power didn't come from land. It came from trade. Florence became a hub of banking and textiles. Venice controlled the movement of goods across the Mediterranean. Genoa built vast credit networks and financed long-distance trade. For the first time since the fall of Rome, Europe was becoming connected again, not by empire, but by money. But success created a new problem. Trade became too complex. A single merchant might be involved in multiple ventures at once, financing wool shipments to Bruges, investing in spices from Alexandria, lending money in Venice, managing warehouses in several cities, all at the same time. Ships took months to arrive. Partners operated hundreds of miles away. Debt stretched across borders. And the tools used to track all this? Primitive, fragile, incomplete. Most records were just lists. A debt scribbled in a notebook. A payment written in the margin of a contract. Some accounts recorded like diary entries. Messy narrative, unclear. The problem was obvious. Lists could show transactions, but they couldn't show the truth. A merchant could see what happened, but not what it meant. Were they making a profit? Were they slowly going bankrupt? No one really knew. Money could disappear without warning. Losses could hide inside complexity. And one bad voyage could destroy everything. Commerce had outgrown its tools. Merchants needed something new. They needed clarity, structure, control. They needed a way to turn chaos into order. Inside small counting houses across northern Italy, that solution began to take shape. These rooms were simple, near docks, markets, warehouses. But inside them, something powerful was happening. Clerks and apprentices worked over ledgers and ink. Young traders were trained not just in business, but in mathematics. And that alone was revolutionary. For centuries, Europe had relied on Roman numerals, a system too clumsy for serious calculation. But now, a new system had arrived from the East. 1, 2, 3, 4, the Hindu-Arabic numerals. Simple, flexible, powerful. They transformed numbers into something merchants could actually use. And slowly, a system began to form. Business records evolved into stages. First came memoriali, rough notes of daily transactions. Then the journal, organized chronological records. But the real breakthrough came with the final book, the ledger, de libro mastro. Here, something extraordinary happened. Transactions were no longer just recorded, they were understood. Every entry appeared twice, once as a debit, once as a credit. If goods were purchased, one account increased, another decreased. If money was borrowed, cash increased, but so did debt. Every action had an equal reflection, perfect balance. At first glance, it seemed simple, but this idea changed everything. Because for the first time in history, a merchant could answer a powerful question with precision. What is my business actually worth? Mistakes became visible. Missing money became harder to hide. Losses could no longer quietly accumulate. For merchants managing vast networks across cities and seas, this clarity was revolutionary. Trade expanded because it could now be controlled. Partnerships strengthened because profits were clear. Credit became safer because risk could be measured. Business stopped being guesswork. It became the system. And yet, for years, this knowledge remained hidden, passed from master to apprentice, from father to son, until one man decided to write it down. In 1494, a mathematician and friar named Luca Pacioli published a book in Venice, Summa de Arithmetica. It was a massive work covering everything known about mathematics at the time. But hidden inside it was something far more powerful, a complete explanation of double-entry bookkeeping. Pacioli didn't invent the system, but he did something just as important. He made it permanent. He transformed a secret practice into a universal language. His ideas spread rapidly across Europe, Germany, England, the Low Countries. Merchants adopted the system. Universities began teaching it. A new generation of traders grew up thinking in ledgers. And with that, something deeper changed. Because double-entry accounting didn't just track money. It changed how people thought about money. Every decision became measurable. Every investment had to justify itself. Every risk had to appear on the books. For the first time, profit and loss could be clearly understood. And once wealth could be measured, it could be expanded. In other words, accounting didn't just follow capitalism. It helped create it. But the real power of the system was only just beginning to appear. Because once wealth could be organized in ledgers, it could grow beyond a single merchant, beyond a single city, beyond even a single kingdom. And the families who mastered this new financial language would reshape the balance of power in Europe. In Florence, one family would rise above all others. A family whose name would become synonymous with money itself. The Medici. Giovanni de' Medici understood something that most merchants of his time completely missed. Success in finance wasn't about chasing more deals. It wasn't about taking bigger risks. It was about something far more powerful. Control. While other merchants ran across the chaotic world of medieval trade, jumping from one opportunity to another, Giovanni did the opposite. He built a system, a structure so precise that every branch, every partner, every transaction could be tracked, measured, and understood, not guessed. And that decision changed everything. By the 15th century, the Medici Bank had grown into something extraordinary. It wasn't just a business anymore. It was a network, a financial web stretching across Europe. Florence, Rome, Venice, Geneva, Bruges, London, Avignon. Each branch operated independently, financing trade, exchanging currencies, issuing loans. But behind the scenes, everything was connected. Every number, every transaction, every risk flowed back to one place. Florence. From there, the Medici could see the entire system, not pieces of it, the whole, without double-entry bookkeeping. This would have been impossible. Think about it. A bank operating across multiple countries had to track different currencies, ships crossing dangerous seas, loans to distant merchants, debts owed by powerful rulers. At any moment, everything could go wrong. Ships could vanish in storms. Kings could delay payments. Merchants could default. And in that kind of world, success came down to one brutal question. Do you actually understand your own money? The Medici did. Their ledgers recorded everything. Assets, liabilities, profits, losses, across every branch, across every deal, across every risk. For the first time, a financial empire could see itself clearly. When a venture failed, the damage was contained. When an opportunity appeared, They moved fast with confidence. In many ways, the Medici Bank looked shockingly modern. It had branch managers, internal reporting systems, structured partnerships, central oversight. It managed liquidity. It monitored risk. It coordinated operations across borders. And holding all of it together was something deceptively simple, the discipline of bookkeeping. But even the most perfect system cannot control human ambition. By the late 15th century, cracks began to appear. After decades of expansion, the Medici started taking bigger risks. They lent massive sums to European rulers, kings and princes whose power looked solid on paper. But reality was different, because royal debt is not always collectible. Loans went unpaid. Branches began to collapse. Oversight weakened. And slowly, the empire that had once dominated European finance began to unravel. But their failure didn't erase their achievement. It proved something even more important, that accounting could build empires. And the Medici were not the last to discover this. A few decades later, in the German city of Augsburg, another family was rising, another dynasty, another financial force, the Fuggers. If the Medici showed how banking could shape politics, the Fuggers showed something even bigger, how accounting could transform finance into industrial power. At the center of it all was one man, Jacob Fugger, known as Jacob the Rich. But his wealth didn't come from banking alone. It came from control. His empire stretched far beyond money. He controlled massive mining operations, producing silver and copper across Central Europe. He financed trade networks from Hungary to Spain. And most importantly, he lent money to kings, not small loans, massive ones, the kind that could decide the fate of empires. In 1519, a battle for power unfolded. The throne of the Holy Roman Empire was up for election. Two men competed, Charles of Habsburg, Francis I of France. The decision didn't rest on armies. It rested on a small group of prince-electors, and their support could be influenced with money. Jacob Fugger financed a campaign that secured Charles's victory. In that moment, something became clear. Power itself could be calculated, measured, and recorded in a ledger. Running an empire like this required something extraordinary. Mining investments, trade operations, royal loans, all producing complex streams of money, flowing in different directions at different times. Without structure, it would collapse. But with double-entry bookkeeping, it worked. Fugger's ledgers tracked everything. Assets, debts, costs, profits, across industries, across regions, across power structures. What began as a merchant's tool had become something much bigger. It became the operating system of financial power. But the true transformation wasn't just economic. It was psychological. Because double-entry accounting didn't just organize money. It changed how people think. Every action had to balance. Every gain had a cost. Every asset had a liability. Every decision left a trace. Over time, this way of thinking reshaped the entire world of business. Instinct gave way to calculation. Guesswork gave way to analysis. Fear gave way to measurable risk. The ledger became something more than a record. It became a mirror that showed the true condition of a business, whether it wanted to see it or not. And once that mirror existed, something incredible happened. Economic systems could grow larger, more complex, more powerful, because now they could be understood. As trade expanded, something remarkable happened. Large partnerships became easier to manage, not because people trusted each other more, but because the numbers created trust. For the first time, investors could see what was happening. Profits weren't hidden. Losses weren't invisible. Everything was there, written clearly in the books. And that changed everything, because once money could be tracked with precision, commerce was no longer limited by memory, no longer limited by instinct. It could scale. Numbers replaced guesswork. Capital became abstract. Wealth was no longer just ships, gold, or goods. It became something else, something more powerful, entries on a page. And once that shift happened, Finance accelerated. Banks multiplied. Joint stock companies emerged. Global trading empires expanded across continents. Colonial ventures, funded by vast networks of investors and creditors. All of it built on one simple idea: the ability to track money accurately, relentlessly, at scale. And at the core of all of it was something surprisingly familiar: debit, credit, balance. Even today, nothing has changed. Modern corporations, operating across dozens of countries, still rely on systems that trace their origins back to the counting houses of Renaissance Italy. Governments track budgets. Investors analyze balance sheets. Markets move based on financial reports. The language is the same, just bigger. But history carries a warning, because this system only works when the numbers are true. The moment accounting loses its connection to reality, everything begins to break. Fraud, manipulation, creative accounting. These don't just distort numbers. They destroy clarity. And when clarity disappears, crisis follows. In 2008, the global financial system nearly collapsed, not just because of housing markets or risky loans, but because of something deeper: a failure of transparency. Complex financial products hid real risk. Balance sheets looked stable. Even as they rotted underneath, the numbers appeared correct, until suddenly they weren't. And nothing is more dangerous than numbers that look right, but aren't. That's the hidden lesson of accounting. The ledger is not just a tool. It's a mirror. It shows the true condition of a business, a bank, an entire financial system. But only if we're willing to see it honestly. The merchants of medieval Italy understood this. Their survival depended on it. A single dishonest ledger could destroy everything, just like a shipwreck. Today, the scale is much larger. Global markets, digital trading, trillions moving in seconds. But underneath all that complexity, the structure is still the same. Assets, liabilities, debits, credits, balance. A quiet system, almost invisible, yet it holds up the entire modern world. Which brings us back to that simple invention, the notebook. In small counting houses, in cities like Florence and Venice, merchants discovered something profound: that by recording transactions carefully, by balancing every entry, they could see wealth clearly. And that clarity changed everything. Clarity created control. Control created expansion. Expansion reshaped the world. Modern finance wasn't built in palaces. It wasn't built on battlefields. It was built in quiet rooms where merchants balanced their books. Accounting may look like paperwork, but 500 years ago, it taught humanity how to think in capital. And once that way of thinking existed, the rest of the financial system was inevitable. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. Because history doesn't just explain the past. It reveals the system we're still living in.